There's an argument to be made that this time is indeed different, that maybe we won't see similar kinds of bear markets in crypto and in Bitcoin as we saw in the past, because now the kind of buyer that gets into Bitcoin tends to just set and forget, tends to just accumulate and never sell. What we see over here is this colored area. That's the number of Bitcoin that's held by the Bitcoin treasury companies. Now in this video, I want to talk about this argument. I want to discuss, does it actually make sense? Because we have this constant buy pressure that Bitcoin will bottom out earlier than in the past, that we don't see those 60, 70, 80% declines anymore. Now for Michael Saylor, the move towards accumulating Bitcoin was very profitable. He started buying in August of 2020, and since then MSTR, so MicroStrategy stock, has outperformed the Nasdaq 100 by more than 500%. At the peak by even more than 1,700%. And prior to those purchases, MicroStrategy was struggling quite a bit. This, by the way, here was the .com bubble with subsequent bursts. So there was obviously a positive impact for Michael Saylor. Was MicroStrategy stock the right decision as an alternative to buying Bitcoin? What we see over here, that's MSTR relative to Bitcoin. Again, the vertical line shows when MicroStrategy started buying Bitcoin. Of course, in the early days, Bitcoin outperformed the stock quite a lot, but that's not when MicroStrategy owned any. And since the adoption of the Bitcoin accumulation strategy, it was indeed the right move to get into the stock rather than get into Bitcoin directly. Now, some people make the argument that MicroStrategy is just a levered version of Bitcoin, that it goes up and down more than the Bitcoin price. And because since MicroStrategy started buying at around 10 to 11k, Bitcoin went up. That's why the levered version, MSTR, did better than Bitcoin. Yes, there is some correlation, right? At the bottom, we see the Bitcoin price. At the top, we see MicroStrategy relative to Bitcoin. So if those two graphs were exactly the same, then we'd have an argument that MicroStrategy is just a levered version of BTC. But the correlation is not perfect, as in MicroStrategy stock does not perfectly just mirror Bitcoin by a multiple X. And we do see that while Bitcoin can go sideways, MicroStrategy stock can still underperform Bitcoin by more than 50%. And so that then poses the question, how constant will the buying of Bitcoin be by those treasury companies going forward? How much more buy pressure can we expect? Here is an eye-opening chart. This is MicroStrategy's purchases of Bitcoin. The bigger the bubble, the more purchases there have been. What we see at the bottom is again the balance in Bitcoin that MicroStrategy is holding. And we can clearly see when the stock price of MicroStrategy or the Bitcoin price is rather low, then the purchases slow down massively. Once Bitcoin hits new all-time highs, that's when MicroStrategy can buy more. And there is a reason for this. MicroStrategy levers up their Bitcoin position. In other words, they use Bitcoin as collateral to buy even more Bitcoin. Now, when the Bitcoin value is rather low, then it's much harder to get more exposure to the asset. And so MicroStrategy is forced to buy when the price is high and can't really buy the bottoms. This is where the retail investor has to step in. And if Bitcoin crashes further, it goes down more and more and then stays at those lower levels, maybe then MicroStrategy is even forced to potentially sell some of their Bitcoin. It didn't really happen in the past, only for tax optimization purposes, but in general, MicroStrategy just buys and buys and buys, but it has to stop buying when the price stops rising. I don't really like doing it, but that's how the YouTube game works. That's how the algorithm works. Please give this video a like if what you've seen so far has been useful. Thank you very much. So here's the number of Bitcoin that have been accumulated over time. Here's the US dollars that were used to accumulate those Bitcoins. So that went up even more steeply. So MicroStrategy is now much more levered than it used to be. It's very smart leverage. It has been able to already withstand quite a bit of a bear market, right? We went from 72k all the way to 16k. MicroStrategy didn't really have to sell anything, but we cannot count on Michael Saylor stopping a potential bear market. So I don't think that this time is different. Despite all of those purchases. Because unfortunately, the treasury companies cannot invest in a contrarian way. Have a look at the MicroStrategy supply that's currently in profit and in losses. When the majority is in losses, the number of BTC isn't going up. Only when MicroStrategy has its supply in profit, when the collateral is worth a lot, that's when more Bitcoin is being purchased. Currently, of course, with the decline of the Bitcoin price and the aggressive buying at the end of last year, we get some supply in losses again. The average cost basis of MicroStrategy's Bitcoin is at 74k. But just because the price falls below doesn't mean that MicroStrategy has to sell. The debt is structured in a very smart way. It can't be recalled. However, if we stay below that cost basis for several years, let's say Bitcoin was to trade at $50,000 for the next 5 to 10 years, then MicroStrategy would be very much in trouble as well. Is that a likely scenario? I don't know. It's just the potential risk that we also expose ourselves to by buying Bitcoin, because now more than 1 million BTC is held by the Bitcoin treasury companies. The current sell-off is also due to the ETFs selling. So this is not treasury company selling, this is the ETFs getting rid of Bitcoin. And it's not just that, it's especially the long-term holders. So the ETF balance change is here in green. The long-term holder balance change, that's in blue. And so the long-term holders are selling off much quicker than the ETFs are. And the treasury companies are not offsetting that. Again, because they can only buy high, they can't really buy the dips effectively. And so really it's a question of how much longer are the long-term holders selling now. Will there be a change of heart at some point? And will the long-term holders buy the dip again as they did in August of last year? Or are they going to continue to take profit and depress the market? Michael Saylor will not be there to rescue us. He's only there to support elevated prices for the long-term holders to potentially take some profit. But again, those long-term holders are much stronger force than the treasury companies. It's really all about the people that got Bitcoin for just a few $100 or a few $1,000 that then at some point diversify their portfolio. And who can blame them? They have helped Bitcoin grow from the early days, and the market for risk on assets does seem quite heated, right? Everybody's talking about a potential popping of the AI bubble. By the way, the premium members of this channel are not very affected by this market crash because we have opened hedging positions very early on based on historical data, based on statistics. If you're interested in that, feel free to check out the membership. It's thebitcoinstrader.com. If it's your very first time here, feel free to also subscribe. I publish here regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. See you next time on YouTube or see you in premium. Cheers.